Hi there, and welcome back to Lean Reads, the channel where we share powerful insights and personal growth lessons through great books. Every day, we are at war, though there are no soldiers, no cannons, no blood. The battlefield is our mind. The enemies are fear, distraction, and indecision. The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene doesn't just teach you how to win battles, it teaches you how to win yourself. If you enjoy what you hear and want to dive deeper, we've included a link to the book in the description below. Now, let's get started. The 33 Strategies of War is a renowned book on strategy, psychology, and power. First published in 2006, it explores 33 strategic principles drawn from the history of warfare, politics, and everyday life. The author divides the book into 5 main parts, each addressing a different aspect of conflict and strategy. Drawing on both classical and modern sources, the book highlights brilliant tactics as well as disastrous mistakes in military history, offering timeless lessons on human psychology, motivation, and the dynamics of power. Robert Greene is an author, playwright, and editor from Los Angeles, California. He graduated in classical studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and later attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Greene is the author of 6 international bestsellers, including Mastery, The 48 Laws of Power, and The Art of Seduction. We realize the value of life. When we confront death on December 22nd, 1849, a freezing morning descended upon St. Petersburg, the capital of the Russian Empire. It was also the morning of a public execution. Prisoners, bound in chains, were led out of their cells to a stone courtyard where wagons carrying coffins were already waiting. Soldiers loaded their rifles. A priest performed the final rites for the condemned. And finally, the commanding officer read out the verdict: death by firing squad. Among the prisoners was a 28-year-old novelist who raised his head. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky. He looked up at the church tower nearby, its spire gleaming in the morning sun, until a passing cloud obscured the light. He suddenly thought that, just like that sunlight fading away, he too was about to disappear into eternal darkness. Dostoevsky did not wish for death. Just a few years earlier, in 1845, his debut novel, Poor Folk, had been published to great acclaim. When he wrote about it in his diary, all of Russia was buzzing with talk of the young writer. Deeply concerned with the struggles of the poor and the oppressed, Dostoevsky was a passionate progressive, hoping one day to witness the downfall of the monarchy and the rise of the people. In 1848, that dream seemed within reach. A wave of revolutions swept across Europe. The revolutionaries called their movement against conservative monarchies the springtime of nations. Excitement filled the air. Dostoevsky joined secret meetings, calling for revolutionary change. The time had come, he believed, to overthrow the Tsar and liberate the peasants who had suffered under oppression for generations. But the uprising in Russia never came. In fact, Tsarist agents had infiltrated those meetings, recording the names of every participant. Before long, Dostoevsky was arrested and imprisoned to await trial. He had hoped for a sentence of hard labor in Siberia, but after 8 long months, he now stood on the brink of death, condemned to execution. As he gazed once more at the church tower, a sudden thought flashed through his mind. If I could somehow survive, life would appear infinite, overflowing with meaning. At that very moment, A carriage raced into the square, carrying a message from the emperor. The prisoners' death sentences were commuted. Dostoevsky was spared and sent instead to Siberia for years of forced labor. That evening, he wrote a letter to his brother, reflecting on his wasted youth and vowing never again to squander a single moment of life. When he was finally released in 1854, Dostoevsky began anew. Before his imprisonment, writing had been a struggle. Every sentence was a battle that could take months to complete. But now, words seemed to flow effortlessly from his hands. He maintained this feverish pace until his death in 1881. In just over 25 years, he produced some of the most profound works in world literature, including Crime and Punishment, The Devils, and The Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky bore no hatred for the suffering he endured in Siberia. Instead, he was grateful. He believed that without that morning, without standing face to face with death, his life would have slipped away in mediocrity. The ordeal had awakened him to the true value of existence and filled him with an unshakable determination never to waste another moment. The story of Dostoevsky is a powerful reminder that we only truly understand the value of life when confronted by death. In moments of despair, the human spirit often finds its deepest strength and desire to live. For Dostoevsky, that single brush with death transformed him and led him to become one of the greatest novelists of all time. When there is no way out, we act with greater resolve. Life is full of possibilities and opportunities, yet freedom itself can also be a burden. We can spend a lifetime creating something meaningful and magnificent, a timeless work of art or literature, but we can just as easily waste our days in distraction and comfort. As Dostoevsky once realized, it's far easier to drink and gamble than to pursue something worthwhile and demanding. Sadly, most of the time, nothing feels truly urgent or necessary. There is rarely a clear answer to the question of what we must do. In other words, freedom often becomes the source of anxiety. The feeling that anything could happen leaves us overwhelmed and disoriented. So we avoid thinking about it, burying that discomfort beneath the pleasant routines of everyday life. Occasionally, however, things become sharply clear. An external force pushes us. A project deadline looms. A new responsibility arises. Suddenly, we are compelled to act, and we know exactly what must be done. In those moments, we feel energized and alive. Life gains focus, urgency, and direction. But once the crisis passes and those new duties become familiar, we slip back into old habits, wondering how to regain that sense of purpose and drive. Throughout history, generals and strategists have asked themselves the same question: how can one inspire soldiers to fight with courage and determination? One common answer was through rhetoric. Great orators were believed to ignite the spirit of their troops through stirring tales of bravery and sacrifice. However, for Sun Tzu, the Chinese strategist of the 5th century BCE, words alone were never enough. He argued that listening to eloquent speeches might boost morale in the short term, but it could not sustain courage. Action is stronger than inspiration. If a commander wanted his soldiers to fight to the last breath, he had to place them in a situation with no escape, a death ground. Only when the soldiers realized that their sole chance of survival was to move forward and defeat the enemy would they fight with absolute resolve. They had to be quite literally, backed against the wall. In life, when you are cornered and failure is closing in, there is still a way out, but only one: to fight with everything you have. Of course, no one can live constantly in such a state. It's far too exhausting. Yet, from time to time, deliberately putting yourself in those no retreat situations can awaken your focus and determination. Just as Sun Tzu observed, the human mind is shaped by its environment. When things are easy and pressure free, our alertness fades, our fighting spirit dulls. But when we're pushed to the edge, our psychology transforms, our focus sharpens, energy surges through us. We act with clarity, urgency, and purpose. When there is no way out, we finally come alive. Costly victories can weigh heavier than defeat. Now, let us leave 5th century China for 3rd century BCE Italy. At that time, Rome was not yet a vast empire. It was still a rising power. As it pushed southward down the Italian peninsula, Rome came up against the city of Tarentum. Founded by Greeks, specifically Spartans, Tarentum was deeply shaped by Hellenic culture. To the Tarentines, the Romans and other Italians were little more than ruffians. They scorned Rome's envoys and even sank their ships. They could afford such arrogance, for Tarentum was the wealthiest city on the peninsula. By 281 BCE, however, Rome had had enough. It declared war. Tarentum did not maintain a strong army of its own. Trade and commerce mattered more to its people than war. They were used to hiring mercenaries to fight on their behalf. For their struggle with Rome, they invited Pyrrhus to take command. Pyrrhus was king of Epirus, a small realm in western central Greece. He claimed descent from Achilles, the legendary hero of the Trojan War. Myth aside, he did have a connection to Alexander the Great. Pyrrhus saw himself as a warrior king in Alexander's mold. Famous for personally leading dangerous charges, he earned the epithet the Eagle. He was also a formidable strategist. Under his command, little Epirus had once defeated the mighty Macedonian army. Sensing the moment was ripe to challenge Rome, Pyrrhus set his sights on Italy, not to conquer the entire peninsula, but to gain a foothold that would fuel a grander campaign to dominate Greece. He believed that a victory over Rome would grant him the resources to confront Athens and Sparta, and so he accepted Tarentum's call. In 280 BCE, Pyrrhus landed in Italy with 20,000 infantry, 3,000 cavalry, 2,000 archers, and 20 war elephants. His arrival sent Rome into a panic. Its generals realized they were outmatched by such a force. They nevertheless mobilized and struck quickly. The two sides met in southeastern Italy. Rome's tactic was to compress Pyrrhus's lines, but when the Epirot king unleashed his elephants, the Roman formations broke. They fled in fear. Pyrrhus had won. Yet the battle was far bloodier than he had anticipated, and he lost many of his best men. Seeking to avoid another clash, he proposed a truce. Rome and Tarentum would divide the peninsula between them. Then Pyrrhus made a crucial mistake. Instead of persuading Rome, he tried to pressure it, sending another army north to intimidate the Romans into accepting his terms. But no one dictates terms to Rome. The war ground on. This time, at the Battle of Asculum, Pyrrhus again prevailed, but at a terrible price. His forces were depleted, and he himself was badly wounded. Rome refused to bend. After each setback, it raised a fresh army. Pyrrhus is said to have told his officers, "Another such victory, and we are ruined." That lament became legendary and gave us the term Pyrrhic victory, A win so costly it amounts to a defeat. You may win the battle, yet lose the war, exhausted, stripped of your advantages, unable to fight the next round. In fact, after winning at Asculum, Pyrrhus suffered a string of reverses. His army returned to Greece, and he was killed in battle in 272 BCE. Epirus never came to dominate Italy or Greece as he had envisioned. When we embark on a new project, enthusiasm runs high. We focus on what we might gain and downplay the risks. The further we go, the harder it becomes to turn back because we've invested so much time, money, and emotion. The greater the reward you crave, the more carefully you must calculate the true cost of obtaining it. Some costs are obvious, others are hidden. Ask yourself, how long will this victory take? What obligations will I incur to allies? With a cool head, you may decide to wait. An easier win may appear once you've built sufficient resources. One of life's greatest traps is complacency. When we think we have endless time, we don't act quickly. When we know we can retreat, we don't fight decisively. When we see only victory, we fail to anticipate hidden risks. Look far ahead before you launch a project or wage a campaign. Ask, is this struggle truly worth it? Should I press now or wait? And when you do step onto life's battlefield, put your back to the wall. Deny yourself the easy escape. When forward is the only option, you'll fight with your full resolve. Reading The 33 Strategies of War is like walking through the hidden corridors of human nature, where ambition, fear, pride, and survival intertwine. Robert Greene doesn't simply write about battles. He reveals the invisible wars we fight every day, within organizations, relationships, and even within ourselves. What struck me most is how timeless these lessons are. Though Greene draws from centuries of military history, from Sun Tzu and Napoleon to modern politics, his message transcends the battlefield. Every decision, every confrontation, every hesitation in life is a small-scale war. The enemy is not always another person. It's often our own weakness, indecision, or complacency. The book forces us to see strategy not as manipulation, but as awareness, the ability to understand the forces at play before reacting blindly. True victory, Greene suggests, comes from self-mastery, knowing when to advance, when to retreat, and when to fight a war worth fighting. Yet the 33 Strategies of War also carries a moral weight. It reminds us that every triumph has a cost, that power can easily turn corrosive, and that strategy without wisdom becomes destruction. Greene doesn't glorify conflict. He decodes it. He shows that peace, focus, and discipline are won through the same clarity that great generals use in war. After finishing this book, I felt both humbled and empowered. It teaches you that life's chaos is not something to fear, but something to navigate with clarity, courage, and purpose. You may not control every battle, but you can choose how to fight, and that choice defines the person you become.